Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. It's Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 26th of October 2023. Let's get on with the general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply and can be found in the description to this video below. We have similar figures to what we've seen over the last week or two, probably 2 weeks now. Really high personnel losses, probably underwritten by what's going on in Avdiivka. 810 personnel is on the higher end of the range for the Russians, and that is it would be obviously a concern for them if indeed they were concerned about human lives. 29 tanks is ticked right back up to a really high number. 18 armoured personnel vehicles and 30 artillery systems. Huge numbers really across those categories, especially taken accumulatively. That 29 tank loss is massive. I don't know if there's anything particular that happened yesterday, whether that is representative of one particular bad spot, or whether that is activity right across the front lines, but Russians are really taking a heavy beating in terms of equipment losses compared to the Ukrainians, although the Ukrainians will be feeling the pressure in Avdiivka. As I mentioned yesterday, it's pretty dicey around there, and I think the Russians are aiming for a Pyrrhic victory, and these are the sorts of figures you would expect to see given that intention, that kind of strategy. 1 multiple launch rocket system, 17 drones. It won't be from last night. I haven't seen yet any information of drone strikes last night, so a particularly quiet night, although I am waiting for this big wave of Russian missile and drone attacks to come, or more than one wave would imagine. 33 vehicles and fuel tanks lost yesterday, or at least totted up yesterday, and that is a heavy loss for the Russians in terms of logistics, and 3 pieces of special equipment. So another bad day for the Russians there. Let's see what Andrew Perpetua, the mapper that I refer to a lot, says of these losses in terms of what he has picked up from different video feeds and social media feeds across the internet. He again shows a sort of 4, possibly 5 to 1 ratio of Russian losses to Ukrainian losses. Let's see what the sort of value of these losses are, whether actually the Ukrainians may have lost fewer bits of kit but might be high value stuff. There's an engineering vehicle for the Ukrainians, a Vicent 1. That's a German provided engineering vehicle. That will be a bit of a loss, though it's damaged. Don't know whether that's recoverable itself to be fixed up. Surveillance and comms, 1 boat, and then 3 pieces of artillery. This self-propelled gun is a Dana. I presume that's not the Bogdana, the Ukrainian indigenously made one, but it might be. No, that is a Czech self-propelled gun that was damaged in the Avdiivka area. So that's interesting because the Russians are pushing back on the Ukrainian artillery in the area there by all accounts. But anyway, that is, at least it's not a Bogdana, only because there's only a couple of those in existence due to it being relatively new self-propelled gun that the Ukrainians are trying to manufacture. Leopard 2A4 as well in those losses. That's another Leopard. There's a few of them been lost over the last week. Then we look at the Russian losses, a couple of TOS 1A, thermobaric pieces of artillery, and some other multiple launch rocket systems as well. So few losses for the Russians there. They won't like that. T-90 tank among the tank losses, and there are quite a few tanks in there, as you'd expect, given the 29 tanks the General Staff have claimed from yesterday. And then the range of IFVs, infantry fighting vehicles, APCs, armored personnel carriers, and trucks and whatnot. So, yeah, the Russians have lost a lot more than the Ukrainians, but there's a couple of Ukrainian losses there that might smart a little bit for them, and that includes that self-propelled gun from the Czechs. Now, Chris Owicki has a thread. We won't go through the whole of it, just the first sort of 10 tweets or so. Hundreds of Russian soldiers may have mutinied in recent weeks. as the Russian army accumulates huge losses in offensives in several regions of Ukraine. At least 173 men were reported to have been detained for refusing orders, and this may just be the tip of the iceberg. Astra reports that it has received almost daily messages from the relatives of men who have been detained in occupied regions of Ukraine after refusing to join assaults. They have told similar stories of drunken commanders and a lack of ammunition, artillery, food and water. The ongoing heavy fighting around Kupiansk and Avdiivka is said to have been the cause of a number of revolts. See below for one example. So there is, this isn't just a mere assertion. There is evidence for the claims. Ex-convicts are also reported to have been detained to pressure them into signing new contracts. Astra has so far recorded the existence of at least 16 places in the occupied regions of Ukraine where Russian soldiers have been illegally detained, the largest and most notorious being at Zaitsevi in the Luhansk region, and there's a video coming from there of people detained in a room there. So I think I've shown you that one before. I've also talked about Zaitsevi previously. According to Astra, it's likely that, quote, the 173 military personnel that Astra knows about are just the tip of the iceberg, end quote. It notes that because the detainees' phones are confiscated, they often cannot contact the outside world. The suggestion of much larger numbers is given credence by the comment of a relative of one of the detainees that men being transferred to Zaitsevi were turned away because the facility, which can accommodate at least 230 men, was already full. The Russian army is reportedly taking men from Zaitsevi and other detention facilities in Ukraine to training grounds in Russia, where they are reformed into units and sent via Rostov to frontline hotspots to carry out assaults. Astra reports that around 50 men from the 15th Motorized Rifle Regiment were taken from the detention facility in Donetsk region to a training ground in Russia's Kursk region. The men were told that they would be sent to Rostov and from there to join the ongoing assault on Avdiivka. According to the lawyer of one of the men who went to Ukraine to challenge the men's legal detention, quote, at first I went to Zaitsevi, but there was no one in Zaitsevi, and I found out that they were being held in Rozhizhny. I drove to the building. It looked like a school building. I went straight to the fence. A military man peeked out from behind the fence. I went over, showed him my lawyer's ID, told him I know for a fact that my clients are here. I want to talk to them, and he did not even look at me. He said, wait, and left, and then came back. He said, there is no one here, so on and so forth. So this indicates that the Russians are probably taking significant losses, really high casualties, to get to the stage where the Russian soldiers are willing to mutiny, and that's what's happened. And then they have been subsequently detained and sent to a number of facilities that appeared to themselves be pretty full, or at least one of them. We have another high-ranked official loss. There's a number of these, actually. I saw another one of an FSB official that was that we now know is dead, quite a high-ranking one, but that was actually from June. Colonel Lisov Denis Nikolaevich, regiment commander, so in charge of a regiment. His last known position was the tank training centre. 386th Motor Rifle Regiment was killed in action on the 19th of October during an artillery strike. Ukraine's main director of intelligence reports about the destruction of 4 FSB officers, so this is different from the FSB officer I just told you about, in the temporarily occupied Berdyansk 2 days ago. That's a city on the south coast of Ukraine on the Azov Sea, just to the northeast of Crimea. On the 23rd of October, a vehicle carrying 4 FSB staff, among them a known Russian war criminal who took part in tortures of local Ukrainians. The incident took place near a hotel where FSB established their HQs. FSB has now moved to another location. They've obviously been compromised. This, I guess, follows on the back of the Washington Post article I referred to, was it yesterday, day before, talking about the connections between the CIA and training the Ukrainian intelligence services and their use of very directed assassinations. That goes back to people like Dugina, so Dugin's daughter, when they swapped cars in Russia, Tatarsky, the Russian mill blogger in St. Petersburg, a number of the Russian submarine commander who was assassinated. I think that was in Rostov or Taganrog. He was out for a jog, and then other targets that have been slightly lower caliber, which then calls into question, whether that's the right approach. You can include Tatarsky in that, the mill blogger. Some people are saying that he shouldn't have been someone they're worrying about. It depends how important you see the information space, and personally, I think it is pretty important. Nonetheless, the FSB here being targeted by the Ukrainian special services, and a successful assassination, it appears, of 4 FSB officers behind the lines. Now, going back to losses of materiel, the US transferred 189 strikers. So those are those armored personnel vehicles that I would say APCs, but it depends whether they have a big gun on the top. There are several variants of those. Anyway, 189 of those being given to Ukraine, 190 Bradleys of various models. The current documented losses from Oryx of these types of equipment are 6 strikers were reported destroyed, meaning 97% still remain in service, and 29 Bradleys have been reported as destroyed, meaning 85% remain in service. So those stats are those are fairly good. Well, strikers very good. It may be that they haven't used strikers all that much in some of the frontline maneuvers. The key benefit of this equipment is that it allows a crew to survive in almost any circumstance due to their armor. So they've been very successful, even if they have failed to take huge amounts of land, the Ukrainian, during their counteroffensive. They've kept a lot of their soldiers alive that otherwise would have died had they been driving older Soviet makes of these types of vehicles. Okay. In Belgrade, 7 fire trucks rushed to the city mall at 10 o'clock this morning. It's not known why. A spokesman unconvincingly, said Tim White here, claimed it was an exercise and urged the public to remain calm. Who knows what's going on there? Could be another Russia on fire incident or almost incident. Right, moving on to strikes and distance hits and whatnot. Quote from Natalia Humenyuk, the spokesperson for the Operational Command South, says it is quite likely that the enemy can use such high precision weapons as the caliber against critical infrastructure objects as they did last time. In addition, we are observing a long pause in the enemy's non-use of KH-101 air-based missiles, which they liked to talk about the past blackout. Again, this talks to the idea that I keep mentioning, that Russia are going to be having a large number, waves of large numbers of missile and drone strikes into Ukraine. It's that awful moment where you're just waiting for something terrible to happen, but there's been such a long pause between heavy usage of these cruise missiles that that they are going to be stockpiling, ready for hitting the key infrastructure points, but also other targets within Ukraine. And you just hope that Ukraine has decent enough air defense. But explosion in Yanakievo in Donetsk Oblast, amongst other explosions yesterday. So there have been hits behind the lines. Another likely fairy tale, says Tim White, from Russia, as it claims to have shot down 2 ATACMS missiles for the first time. It's very doubtful the terrorist state has the capability to intercept these types of missiles, but the story will make the troops feel better. These claims have come out. ATACMS are, I think, will be very difficult to shoot down, given their trajectory and the type of missile they are. However, there have been 2 parts of ATACMS found yesterday, a pair of expended Ukrainian MGM-140 ATACMS after a strike this morning on Russian-occupied Belorechensky, Luhansk Oblast. So there's several things to note here. One, ATACMS are being used. I've only really heard about them at the 2 airport strikes on that first night of ATACMS strikes. Yet we know they have, we believe they have 20 in the first batch, and probably more by now, as they were given the green light. And I assume they'll be using them more widely than just those 2 strikes, those 5 missiles sent and then just sitting on their hands. But we haven't heard the details of them being used. But now here we have evidence of 2 spent parts of the missile found in Luhansk. This will feed into the Russian claims that they were shot down. But you got to remember that, quote, this is from Yuri Ignat, just because they photographed the engine from ATACMS, which was found after the strike, doesn't mean they shot it down. So this is what you would expect given a successful strike. In fact, we saw this part of the missile in the Berdyansk airport and Luhansk. I can't remember which one it was, but we saw similar sort of imagery coming out of there. So that doesn't mean they were shot down at all. I mean, I don't know either way. I doubt the Russians have shot them down due to the difficulty in doing so. A video, and given that they've struggled with other missiles, a video has emerged said to be an explosion which hit Khmelnytsky region last night, 10 miles from the nuclear power plant. Now, this came out yesterday, so this was from the 24th. Remember, I said there was a strike near the nuclear power plant in Khmelnytsky, and very little information has come out about it. And actually, it was a really big explosion by the looks of it. The claim was it's from falling debris. Tim White says, I cannot confirm it's genuine, but it didn't show up in searches I've made. As I hinted at, it looks a bit more like falling debris, causing some major explosion somewhere. But that is, as you can see, a sizable explosion, and there were a good number of houses that lost electricity on the back end of that. So that is in the Khmelnytsky region, which is sort of central Ukraine, I guess. Quite a long distance from the front lines, that's for sure. And that's a significant explosion. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces. So there's not a huge amount in the strikes category, and that was even from the night before. Anton Gerashchenko says a conversation has appeared online reportedly between Dmitry Rogozin, ex-head of Roscosmos, so that's their space agency, and Dmitry Baranov, head of the Russian Progress Rocket Space Center. The conversation reportedly took place in January 2023, so this is some sort of 10 months old. But they discussed, this is a war crime, I'm pretty sure. Or at least the intention of one. They discussed organizing a strike on a large Ukrainian city with a carrier missile that is used for space flights. They reached a conclusion that it would be best to launch it from the space pad in Plesetsk with explosives on board. They were worried that parts of the rocket might fall on Russian territory and that the error on impact might be up to 100 kilometers. So your circle error probable is not 100 meters, not 10 meters. A HIMARS is what? Is it 5 meters or so? 1 to 5 meters, something like that. 100 kilometers. Yeah, so that could pretty much hit. And so if you are going to send it into Ukraine, make sure you go for the middle of it, because you could hit anywhere within 100-mile radius. Well, 100-kilometer radius. Well, yeah, terrible. So they're discussing that. I don't know what that tells you, other than you have people, I guess, outside of the military in on making what looks like war criminal strikes against the Ukrainians, and debating how best to do that. Ukraine and the Russian Federation continue to negotiate on humanitarian issues, even in the face of a brutal war, says the Washington Post. The parties agree on the exchange of prisoners, the passage of ships from Black Sea ports, and the return of Ukrainian children. In some cases, Ukraine and Russia use intermediaries, including Turkey, Qatar, and the UAE, Saudi Arabia, etc. So this is a back channel that is open between the Ukrainians and the Russians. Now, we know these sort of things are very commonplace in international politics. We know that the US has a telephone line to Russia and other such places. Shouldn't be of a surprise, although they are fully at war, and sometimes you think they are definitely not talking to each other and just going for it. So make of that what you will. The house of Russian blogger Anatoly Shary had Molotov cocktails thrown at it in Spain. So this is a house he has in Spain. It looks like a fairly nice house as well. So he's obviously doing very well for himself, this blogger. I mean, I've blogged for 12 years, right? And I'd like a house like that. In 2021, the SB, maybe I should just contact the Kremlin and just say, look, I'm fed up of being moralistic. I just want the money now, mate. Poots, me old mate. If I blog for you guys, can I have a house in Spain? But then, Molotov cocktails. And of course, I'm not going to do that. In 2021, SBU announced suspicions against Shary of high treason. In May 2022, that's 2021, in May 2022, the Spanish police detained the blogger and banned him from leaving the country. I think I reported that as well. Okay, here we have quite a number of Molotov cocktails being thrown at this house. And I mean, the only thing, big swimming pool there, nice place, but it does have a children's play area here. So you do worry that throwing a Molotov cocktail at a house with kids, potentially with kids in, is a bit of a worry, unless, they weren't there, they'd timed this correctly, or I don't know. Nonetheless, that has happened. And priest of Moscow-linked church. So I talked about the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which has links to Russia, having a lot of pressure being put on it by the Ukrainian government, possibly being sort of constrained from operations by political laws and whatnot being discussed and enacted. Anyway, the reason being because priest of Moscow-linked church sentenced to 15 years for spying for Russia. An abbot of the Kremlin-linked Ukrainian Orthodox Church, Moscow Patriarchate, UOCMP, has been sentenced to 15 years in prison for spying on the Ukrainian military in Russia, according to the Ukraine's security service SBU. And that is the end of today's first news video. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate your support. And I'm going to get on and do the second one. There is also an extra video out that I did last night, but I left it rendering and went to bed because it was 1:30. And that is out today. Go and check that out. It is out much earlier than I would normally pull out one of those because of whatever. Appreciate your support. Take care. Speak soon.